Welcome to the Childcare Revolution Podcast, where we talk about all things childcare.
Hi, my name is Tegan.
Hi, I'm Patricia.
And I'm Stephanie.
We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit.
Welcome back to episode 13 with ECEC Honestly and the Childcare Revolution Pod. Last week we left off talking about parents and the sacrifices that they have to make in order to be able to get childcare for their children. Let's dive back to where we left off and continue.
And it's because all these inequalities that if only we had the universality of childcare, nobody would have to go through like all this process. And I think it's unfair to require parents to do all this research to find the best childcare for their child.
Yeah.
Whether it's licensed or not, whether this is a good quality one, am I making a bad decision for my kid?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, as a parent, I can only assume, as quality parenting, you want to make the best decisions and you want the best for that little person that you've brought into this world. But you're literally working through a system that is designed to make you fail.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And going back to that topic of quality, there's the big question on what is quality and how do we make it come to life? And that's also varies heavily across provinces. So for instance, for us, we have the Childcare and Early Years Act, which is now under revision and is possibly changing in 2020 in Ontario. 2021. Oh my goodness. I just forgot what year we were in.
I think based on everything that's happened in the last 2 weeks of 2021, I think we're you know what? This is still 2020.
It's not even a year anymore. It's just we just sit. Oh my gosh. So we have the Ministry of Education with the Childcare and Early Years Act, and it might be changing 2021. And it's pretty scary because once again, they've gone back to the idea of heightening our ratios, so increasing I don't know if you've had the opportunity to see it at all, but they want to increase the age in each classroom. So I think toddlers, they want to say 2-year-olds can be in a preschool classroom of 24 children.
What? No.
Yeah.
Such a disservice to those little 2-year-olds.
And so that's just one of the things. They also want to make unlicensed registry of unlicensed childcare registry, so that people can find unlicensed
childcare,
which is great.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you don't know, I'm a very sarcastic person. So,
but I mean, because we have something kind of similar in BC. What we have is our ratio here is, and everything is kind of based on, again, municipalities. So we have something called Vancouver Coastal Health and Fraser Health. And that's kind of where your licensing officers will be from. And that's, again, based on municipality, right? And, what we have is, and I've always said this, licensing requirements are great, but they're nowhere near what they should be, right? It's very basic, and it's so basic that we're just there to just meet a safety standard.
It's either overregulated or highly underregulated. There's no in between.
100%. And for us, and it really depends on the philosophy of each individual licensing officer. Right. So, and, are they more traditional? Are they the type of people that's this is what it says, therefore we have to follow that. Right. And it's that actually makes no sense. When you actually put it into practice, it makes no sense versus somebody else who's going, yes, this is what the paper's saying, but clearly this is not benefiting this community, this society. So how are we going to find ways that we can meet these requirements, but more importantly, we're meeting the needs of these children, of this community, which is what it should be, right?
Mm-hmm. And kind of like that, like it depends for us by municipalities as well, but majority of Ontario focuses on the two frameworks that we have. ELECT is kind of a framework that is still in existence, still circulates. So ELECT is early learning for every child today.
Okay.
And it's basically a stage theory. So it has ages and stages, what each child should be accomplishing at each age. Mm-hmm. And this is phasing out. It's not used, but it is still used at the same time. And then we have the How Does Learning Happen document, which is more used. And this is the framework that is very openly used in different centers. So it's not like people just put it on their website saying, this is what we follow, when it's not what they follow.
Right.
As per usual. So this becomes an issue. And then those are the two things that are done by the Ministry of Education. So the Ministry of Education will come in and it's not looked at properly when they enter these classrooms.
For sure.
But then you go into Toronto and they actually have to follow AQI, which is, oh my goodness.
Assessment Quality AQI.
I've had to write it out so many times recently and I'm blanking.
There's so many acronyms I find like in our sectors that you're just like, okay, what does this stand for? What does that mean? Blurt it out, knowing what it is without actually knowing what it stands for. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But it's essentially like a set of criteria, like it's very specific, like how many books you have to have in your classroom, like those kind of things. Yeah. And then it's just like it's getting bureaucratic, like almost.
It's heavily like policed. So like they'll come in and they will literally be going through all of your toys and everything in corner. Your classroom. Making sure that there's like nothing there's no dust, no nothing. Each child, like say you're in a classroom of 15 toddlers, I think it's each child needs to have like 2 books on the shelf each.
What?
So you need like 30 books on a shelf.
Mm-hmm. That's really overwhelming for little children.
Yes, it is. And that's not even that's just a minor corner.
So like, we're kind of going back to like a regimented, like military grade, list versus a philosophical one based on, again, research and evidence to say that's actually not going to benefit these children. Like, exactly. You know what I mean?
No.
Yeah, that's really ridiculous. Like here, what we have, kind of like, those, kind of like what you were saying about your, the frameworks, we have something called the BC Early Learning Framework, or it's better known as ELF. And that recently went through a revision. The older version was good because it was based on pedagogy, on creating environments that are beneficial to children, that serve that community, that serve the learning of that child, of viewing the child as having knowledge and how are we helping them unleash knowledge, right? And this newer version that's recently come out, that's actually getting a lot of praise from a lot of people in the ECE community here in BC. Again, more specifically here in Vancouver, is the fact that, we, in this framework, we talk about decolonizing, the field of education, where we talk about, all these new, all the new philosophies and all the new ideas, that we are trying to push and promote. And now we actually have a framework that is, provincially not mandated yet. I don't know if they will or will not mandate it, but, that is something that's come from government that's saying, this is what you should be basing, your classroom environments on, which is a good thing, right? Because again, we're coming back to this understanding that, education does need to change.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's, I think I like yours better than I like ours. So, How Does Learning Happen is a great document. I find it can be a little basic basic at times and a little bit left up to too much interpretation. I'm more of like a middle ground person. I think we need a bit of regulation, but also open-endedness, and where you can be
100%.
innovative and design what you feel is best
And I think
based off of your education.
people forget to understand, right? We're not saying that it should all be like free and do whatever you want, because there should be an element of safety standards that we need to be meeting, because you are working with extremely vulnerable, little people, right? Like, nobody's saying that there should not be safety regulations or like, we should not mandate certain things, but at what point are we literally like going, okay, did we check off the list of everything we were supposed to do today, versus yes, we're still meeting care and safety, we're still doing that aspect of everything, but how do we also merge these new philosophies and, kind of go through the flow of the day, versus having a mandated schedule of things that we should be meeting, or has that one toddler read those 2 designated books, that's be for them. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think, I think it's just, for us, it's like a dream, and hopefully a dream that's going to be brought to reality soon enough. But it's just so, it just doesn't make you feel like an educator. It just feels like you're just either a babysitter, or you're just a person with a stack of paper that you're just checking off constantly.
Sure.
And it's just, it doesn't allow for children to have the education and care that we need, that they need, and that we need. I'm heavily focused on educators' well-being in the classroom and in the work environments, and these documents do not promote that either for either person.
But I think also something that's, that we also is ever changing, right? Like, we talk so much about the needs of the child. And again, yes, that's important. We are here to service the education of these children and, the care of these children, but also understanding that we as educators, we're in a sector that gives so much, emotionally, mentally, physically, we also need to be taken care of.
Definitely. And knowing that our well-being like directly affects the children that we're taking care of too.
100%, like if and I mean, I'm sure we've all, we all have bad days, right? Like we all have days where maybe our mental health is just not where it should be. And, having to force yourself to, to be peppy, to be to be that educator, to be, come into work and fake happiness, for lack of better words. That's a challenge, when all you want to do that day is like lay in bed and have a good cry or whatever, right?
Especially when you're in an environment that's just not healthy either.
Absolutely.
And like at one point, I think I just got to my kids where we were so real with each other, and I'm like, Miss Stephanie's not having a good day today, so I'm just going to be a little bit like down, and they would just understand. And it's just like, you need to have that with them. And it's funny that like an environment that was bad brought out a realistic relationship.
But that, and I think that to, how you view children, right? Like you view them capable enough to understand and to have empathy towards an adult, right? Like, being able to say to, a group of children, like, I'm sad today, or I don't feel well. Like, I'm not going to be the same person that I am the other days. And for those children to have, that understanding that, okay, maybe we're going to take a little step back and give Miss Stephanie some space, because I understand that sometimes that's what I need when I'm upset, right? Like that's amazing. And that it shows that level of understanding that children can have, right? Like we do not value childhood. And again, this kind of comes back to, it all comes back to politics. Like, if we value children and childhood, we're going to see that as important, and we're going to see that having quality education from early on is a benefit, right? Like, and again, that all comes back to also, what is your view on childhood? How do you view children? Do you just view them as these mindless little beings that we are just going to have in society, but not actually value until they reach a certain age or until they reach adulthood, versus seeing them as capable and members of society that deserve as much respect as anybody else?
Yeah. And choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that's what it comes back to, like we were talking about at the beginning, choice of women, choice of families, choice of children. Do they want to go to early childhood education and care? Like
Yeah,
they should have a little bit more say in that as
totally,
well. And
totally.
just
And how do they want it to be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of environment they want?
Absolutely. And I mean that's vital as well, because if you're
Mhm.
forcing a child, and I mean sometimes this again may just have to be out of necessity, but you know, if you're forcing a child to go to an environment that is toxic for them, like you're doing that child a disservice, right? Like there
Yeah.
are certain children that don't want to go to certain childcare environments because it's a toxic environment and they don't want to be there, right? But many times, because there's no other choice, again, they
get no say.
yeah, they have exactly, they
Mhm.
have no say. And because, you know, a parent has to work, I'm sorry, but you have to go to this environment every day and suffer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's just, yeah,
Mhm.
traumatic all around.
Absolutely.
So with all of that, I think, did we kind of cover what we wanted to?
I think we went in like many different
I think so.
directions.
I like it. It worked out well, I think. we got there.
Absolutely.
I think the one question though is that the last question that we kind of had was, what do you want to see from a future provincial government or federal government?
Oh God.
Like
do we have another hour?
in a short couple of sentences, and ideally, what ministry would you like to see them under?
So definitely here in BC, we need to make that change. We need to step away from being under the BC Ministry of Children and Family Development, and we need to be under the BC Ministry of Education. Like that in itself is just like, that should just be obvious. And it's not obvious to us, I think, here, because it's just been that way for so long that when you're finally kind of being brought to that alternative, you're saying, if you yourselves are educators, why are you not under that same umbrella as every other educator? Then that starts making sense to you. You know, that little change could mean a vast of difference, right? So definitely that would be one. And I think we also need a pay grid, much like our teachers here. You know, like we are so heavily, you know, our wages is heavily dependent on childcare fees, which is again a whole other topic, right? Those are sky high, and you know, parents are paying ridiculous amounts to have their children in quality environments. But of those childcare fees, so much of it has to be allocated to like the lease, or you know, can we keep the lights on? Do we have hot water? You know, like in every household, right? Like, yes, maybe you make a certain amount of funds, but how much of that is actually going to go in your pocket versus how much of it is going to somebody else, right? And if you work in a private daycare, your fees might be significantly lower because there's only so much money that can be allocated towards the people actually working versus you work in a nonprofit. Now you have to prove why you need all those donations and all those grants.
Do you get a wage enhancement grant?
It's dependent on, so it used to be very dependent on from center to center.
Okay.
So in my last center that I worked in, it's interesting. So if you are an assistant, you might make, you know, a certain amount that is significantly lower than, say, an infant toddler educator. You kind of max out at a certain amount once you get your infant toddler education. And in many places, if you do keep going and get special needs or a degree, that's great. You've just spent all this money getting a degree, but that means that's of no monetary benefit to you. Like, you know what I mean? And in other societies, it might just be like, we want equality, so everybody gets paid the same, which I also don't agree with, because I should not be paid the same for having, you know, for investing in that education so that I could work with a younger age group or a more vulnerable age group. I should not, like the person who maybe just took basic ECE to work with, you know, with school age children before and after school should not be paid the same as me.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? And so it's really, it's kind of odd in that sense. But what I will say right now for the NDP government is that we are slowly starting to have wage enhancements. So it happens from year to year. I think the first year, it's basically going up in increments of $1 or $2 a year. So we are slowly starting to see that we are getting a little bit more money. So it's like, you get paid your wage from your employer, but then the government's going to top that off with an extra $2 an hour, a paycheck.
Okay, that's what we have here, which I think our conservative government tried to get rid of at one point, as per usual. So we get the $2 an hour, but I think the one thing that's really unnecessary when it comes to that is like you can't include that when you're like applying for a mortgage. It's not consistent income.
That's like that as well. Yeah, it's basically like you get that extra money, but it really doesn't service you other than you are making more money. But again, it's the same thing. It doesn't really count as anything.
Yeah. Right. So that's interesting. Just wanted to see if we were kind of on the same page in that sense too. How about you, Tegan? What do you want to see?
It's sad to say that even though we are already under the Ministry of Education here in Ontario, that doesn't mean that we're any better than in BC.
Right.
Which is sad. But I do believe that having it under the Ministry of Education will benefits like the journey toward like making childcare a public good, just like public education, rather than like social welfare that you mentioned, right? At this point, I don't even know. Like, my hopes are high.
Yeah.
And it's just how this government's been treating the ECEs and children and families, kind of like, it's sad. But I'm hopeful for the national childcare system that is on the table, and about like Canada having their national secretariat to help build this system. Obviously don't know how long it's going to take and how it's going to unfold, but that's my hope for now.
It would be... Sorry, go Kayla.
I was just going to say, I think ideally, and I think that most ECEs across the country, regardless of province or territory, would agree, like, we literally just need a federal mandate, right?
Right.
I think, like, going on the childcare secretariat is, like, it's such a great idea. And the fact that maybe it could one day even just turn into like an early childhood education and care ministry. And it's solely based on that. Because honestly, I'm going to be real with you. I don't want to be attached to the school systems. I don't believe in their education system whatsoever. No. I do not want childcare looking like that education system. No. I like how childcare has the opportunity to be both, to be innovative and different, and focuses on the children's needs rather than what we think the children need.
For sure.
And so I think that would be something kind of interesting. Obviously, how feasible that is, probably slim to none.
Unless like some miracle happens or more people just start actually gaining awareness, right? And I think it literally just kind of all comes back to the ignorance of the majority of our society.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and it's unfortunate because it's literally, and I've had conversations with people where I'm trying to argue my fact and I'm just like, you know what, I give up. Like you're so set in your mind that this is the only way that this is, that there's just no point in me wasting my breath, even trying to, what's the word I'm looking at? Like educate you on why it's not that way.
Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of the problem that we have in our ECEC sector, we don't have a system yet. Lots of what we've been dealing with are also interrelated to other care sector, like long-term care, because we're all like, we are still devalued. And I feel like that's the core of the problem that in our society nowadays, care is devalued. Care is just like something that people don't want to spend money on, don't want to spend their funding on, and something that they think don't benefit them. But we have to change that mindset that care is the core of the society and how we're going to survive this pandemic.
Yeah.
But it's hard.
But I think, again, it just kind of comes back to this idea that care should be free labor.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and that's always, and I mean, it was for such a long time that much like anything else, like it slowly is going to start, you know, it's going to be a very slow, long process until we finally reach that goal.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just going to take a lot of fighting.
Yeah. Like, I've been very anxious about the future, and I should stop looking at future job prospects and what I could possibly get into after my degree's done. But I actually was researching, and I came across a couple of sites, and they said the worst possible fields or sectors to get into is early childhood, because your rate of return, and this is just solely based off the rate of return from how much money you put out into education versus how much of a return you get. And it's brutal. Like, we were like, I think number 9 out of 10 on the worst list.
And of course, people working in that sector, you're like, yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
But you know, it's funny, like, people always ask me, like, why did you go into education? I'd be like, well, obviously it wasn't to be a millionaire. You know, you go into this sector very well knowing you're not going to make a decent living wage, much less anything beyond that, right? Like, I think like you're lucky if you even make a decent living wage, right? Like, that in itself is like, this is a good thing, which might seem ridiculous to other people, but is very much a universal truth amongst the ECE community. Right? And like, why do we go into this sector? Because we understand the value behind it. We understand why it's important. And I'll put this out there. If you as a person are a quality early childhood educator, you understand that there is an advocacy part to your job that you have to maintain throughout your career.
Yeah. Agree.
It's like thinking back to myself a couple years ago when I just graduated, and I was like, people were like, why are you going into it? There's no money. And I'm like, I don't care about money. I don't need it. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I have so many bills to pay for. And that's me being my ignorant, naive, like early 20s self. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, I do need to have a living, and I shouldn't feel bad about asking for that.
Yeah, totally.
And like having it. And I don't think, I've said this many times, I don't think any ECE is expecting, like you said, Kayla, to be millionaires. I don't think they're even expecting to make 100K. I think everyone just wants enough money to like have a little bit of saving, a little bit of comfort, and do the job that they love.
So that I'm not like worried, and many educators live paycheck to paycheck, and that's just a sad reality. But they're so dedicated in that sector, like the work that they do is amazing, and you see it in the communities that they work in, or in the children or with the children that they work for, right? Like, there is a certain reward that is not necessarily monetary that does come with this field, but I should not have one or the other. Like, I should be entitled to have both.
Right.
Exactly.
We put so much dedication and hard work into schooling. And, again, if we were to actually look at everything that we have to learn, from biology, many of us had to learn, like, how does gestation affect, a child later on, right? Like, you basically learn how certain things can factor into a little person's life as early on as conception.
Yeah.
And, you touch on everything from biology, psychology, to this, to that, like, and it's all wrapped up in care and love, and you have to learn it, and you have to learn it fast.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm like my throat's dry. I don't think I've talked this much in so long after being done school. It's like when you're off of Zoom, you just don't use your voice. But yeah. I don't even know what I'm saying.
It's so much, right? And I mean, this could very well be like a 4-hour long episode, right? Just because there are so many subjects that we have to talk, that are worth tackling. But for the sake of not taking up too much time, like, yeah, you really much have to condense it. But I think it's worthwhile for the ECEs who are listening, to understand that they are going to be their best advocate. If they want to see change in this field, first of all, uphold the title of educator. Do not uphold that title of babysitter, and that's very much reflected in how you work, what your practice is and what you do, right? Like, you yourself are going to be your best advocate by being a professional in your sector. And again, that's upholding the title of educator and not upholding the title of babysitter. And secondly, like, getting out there and, using platforms like this, or sharing platforms or episodes like this to people who may not understand or refuse to understand why this is an important sector. Because I mean, the research is out there, the knowledge is out there, the studies are out there. The difference is, are people willing to actually go and like look for it or read it or listen to it?
Yeah.
So
it's just being able to make it accessible. Like, that was one of my biggest things, was after learning about advocacy is a lot of work, yes, but there are parts of it that don't require a lot of energy.
No.
And you can just do it daily, something small. For instance, finding one news article to read or one study to read, and that's all you do for the day. But that's advocacy work. You're taking that time to learn something new. Okay. And I, on my own personal ECE account, I've actually, like, Instagram account, I was making these how to advocate for yourself in ways that you feel comfortable. And I think that's so important, is that start off small. We're not expecting you to go out there and make your own podcast and like be so open and talking about how you feel and who you are in this sector, but just taking some opportunity to do something for a sector is more beneficial than not, and will make a massive amount of difference in our world.
Yeah,
I like that.
And this idea of like, you don't have to be loud in order to advocate.
No, and like, I mean, if you are, that's great.
Yeah.
Everybody. I think there was oh my goodness, I always forget his name, but it was in one of my courses that I took, and he was the idea of ecology. And his basic thought was the fact that, when I find his name, I will add it in the description down below, because honestly, I'm blanking. But pardon?
Is it Peter Moss?
No.
What did he say?
He basically said that in all types of advocacy work, you need the people that are doing like the major movements, and then you need the people doing the little ones. So you need people thinking about the long run and people doing the short term. So that's something that we as EC should consider, definitely, is if you don't want to do something long term, think of short term, or vice versa.
Totally. I like that a lot.
So.
All right, well, I think that's a wrap then.
Yay!
Did it.
I love that.
Thank you so much, Kayla.
No,
awesome.
Thank you, Kayla, for having us.
Thought that was awesome. When you reached out to me, I did not know that, it's amazing how, in this day and age, social media can connect people in such a way, right? Like, we never would have crossed paths if it was not for Instagram, right? And the fact that you can make these connections, provincially, that's going to speak so much to the unification of early childhood, because we are all fighting the same fight. And in our, in the unification of us as educators, we are going to be a stronger source of power.
Exactly. They don't want us talking. They don't want us knowing each other's difficulties and successes. So
you gotta smash that patriarchy, right?
Exactly.
So true.
Love it.
Thank you so much. That's awesome. So this is Kayla from EC Honestly. And then this is Stephanie and Tegan from the Childcare Revolution Podcast. I don't know if we needed that ad lib or whatever.
I just wanted to say too that if there is anybody who wants to reach out, even maybe we'll make it to another province or territory. You never know, right? Like if you want to reach out, email, you can always email ecehonestly@gmail.com, or you can find us on our Instagram and send us a DM at ecehonestly.
The Childcare Revolution podcast would like to remind our listeners that we are not affiliated with any colleges, universities, associations, or institutions. We're just a couple of passionate educators speaking some thoughts into the air. Thank you for joining us. Please like, follow, and subscribe to listen to more episodes of the Childcare Revolution podcast.